Nolan Hart was no stranger to the complex world of intergalactic missions. As an esteemed scientist and one of the most trusted commanders in Earth's space forces, he had faced countless challenges, endured harsh environments, and taken on enemies in defense of humanity's future. Each mission had honed his skills, fueled his ambition, and reinforced his loyalty to Earth's high command. But even as he followed orders without question, nothing in his career had prepared him for the orders he received that day. Commander Richard had summoned him with an unusually serious tone. His orders were concise, but chilling. Retrieve an alien, specifically chosen from one of the outer colonies, transport her back to Earth, and, using the new artificial sun, render her unconscious for examination by the planet's top scientists. The mission's goal was simple, but cold: understand the anatomy and physiology of an alien through in-depth studies while she was unconscious. He would harness the effects of a powerful sun over an isolated ocean on Earth, a sun designed to emit a radiation field that, after 10 hours of exposure, would disrupt an alien's biology enough to cause a temporary shutdown. Standing at attention in front of Commander Richard, Nolan hesitated, breaking his usual discipline to voice his uncertainty. "With all due respect, Commander, why an alien and why this method?" Commander Richard's face remained stern, his gaze unwavering. "This is classified, Hart. You're being asked to follow through with a mission that could change everything. Earth's future relies on understanding the unknown. We've trusted you with some of the most challenging missions before. Don't doubt yourself now." Nolan nodded reluctantly, swallowing his misgivings. This was the job. This was duty. Tomorrow, he would embark on a journey to find and bring back his target, an alien woman chosen for reasons he wasn't privy to. The next day, Nolan boarded his craft, setting coordinates to the alien colony. The journey was long and silent, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The alien colonies were still largely uncharted territory, though Earth had made strides in diplomatic relations with a few select worlds. Some species had proven hostile, others neutral, and a few had become allies. But it was always a fragile balance. As he neared the colony's border, Nolan reviewed the scant information he had been given about the alien. His target was female, of a race noted for their strength and intelligence. Her species, rumored to be fierce yet surprisingly compassionate, intrigued him. He wondered why High Command had chosen a female for this experiment, but he shook the thought from his mind. After receiving permission to land, he arrived at the colony and was led into a secure area. There his target awaited him, an ethereal figure standing tall, with a striking beauty that caught him off guard. Her skin shimmered in hues he couldn't quite identify, and her eyes were a vivid, mesmerizing color. She carried herself with a calm confidence that he found disarming. Her name was Livara. He approached her, his voice steady but softened by an inexplicable need to connect. "Livara," he began, "I come with an offer that could bring you a new life, one full of freedom and experiences beyond this colony." She looked at him with intrigue, studying him as if she could see beyond his words. His calm, persuasive tone seemed to break through her initial caution. For reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself more sincere in his offer than he had intended. She agreed to go with him, curiosity sparking in her eyes as she questioned him about Earth, its culture, and its people. During the journey back, Livara's questions became increasingly personal. She spoke of her dreams, her curiosity about Earth, and the life she imagined there. Nolan, normally reserved and distant, found himself drawn into the conversation. He answered her questions honestly, the connection between them growing deeper with every exchange. Despite his training, he struggled to detach from her captivating presence. She was graceful, intelligent, and bold, challenging him in ways he hadn't expected. He fought the impulse to reveal the true purpose of their journey, his heart growing heavier with each passing moment. Finally, they reached Earth. He led her to a secluded beach where the artificial sun blazed in the sky, casting an intense light over the vast expanse of ocean. Livara's face lit up as she saw the sea for the first time, her all radiating from her as she took in the sand, the waves, and the unfamiliar warmth. For a while, He allowed himself to forget his mission, watching her delight as she stepped into the water, laughing as she felt the cool waves against her skin. "Come on, Nolan," she called, holding her hand out to him, a bright smile on her face. "Show me how to swim." Nolan hesitated, feeling the weight of his hidden intentions. But her joy was infectious, and he couldn't resist. He stepped into the water, guiding her through each movement, teaching her how to float and move with the waves. For a brief moment, he let go of his mission entirely, surrendering to the happiness he felt with her. Hours passed, and Livara's energy began to wane. The powerful sun overhead began to take its toll on her alien biology. She looked at him with a trusting smile as she lay on a beach chair, closing her eyes and sighing contentedly. "Thank you, Nolan," she murmured, "for showing me this. I feel different here, closer to you." His heart ached as he watched her. The time was slipping away, and soon, the effects of the sun would render her unconscious. He checked his watch for hours to go. Every minute felt like a countdown to betrayal. She reached out, squeezing his hand, her eyes filled with an affection he couldn't bear to look at directly. Her words lingered in his mind, taunting him with a vision of a life they could share if only he could abandon his orders. The hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Livara's skin had taken on a soft flush from the heat, and she started to squirm uncomfortably. "It's getting warm," she murmured, opening her eyes and looking at him with a slight frown. Nolan forced a smile, his voice barely steady. "It'll pass. This is just part of the adaptation process." He knew the words sounded hollow even as he spoke them, and guilt twisted inside him like a knife. Livara, trusting as she was, nodded and settled back against the beach chair, her skin glistening with a faint sheen of sweat. Her expression softened as she looked toward the horizon, unaware of the toll the artificial sun was taking on her. Nolan sat beside her, his heart pounding, watching each minute tick by with a gnawing sense of dread. The ocean shimmered under the intense rays, its waves reflecting a light almost too brilliant to bear. Livara's breathing slowed, her chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm as her eyes drifted shut. She turned her face toward him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Nolan, this world is beautiful. I didn't expect it to be this warm, this bright," she murmured, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I feel so alive." Nolan's heart ached at her words, each one a reminder of the truth he was hiding. He wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but a deeper part of him fought to stay loyal to his mission, the oath he'd taken as a commander to put Earth's safety above all else. Yet, with every passing second, that loyalty felt weaker, overshadowed by the undeniable connection he felt for this alien woman who trusted him so completely. Livara's hand found his, her fingers curling around his as she gazed at him with a gentle warmth that made his breath catch. "You've given me so much already, Nolan," she whispered, her voice breaking through his thoughts. I never imagined that I could feel this close to someone from another world." His pulse quickened, a strange thrill mingling with the guilt. She believed in him, in the life he'd promised. She didn't know that he was bound to betray her in just a few hours. "Livara," he began, but his voice faltered as he looked into her trusting eyes. Her expression softened, and she reached up, brushing her fingers against his cheek, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Tell me, Nolan," she said, her gaze unwavering. "When all of this is over, when I've adjusted, will we be together?" He swallowed hard, the words caught in his throat. He wanted to tell her the truth, to let her see the struggle inside him, but how could he? What would she say if she knew his mission was to render her unconscious, to hand her over to those who saw her as nothing more than a test subject? "Yes," he lied, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, we'll be together. I promise." Her smile widened, radiant, and she relaxed back on the beach chair, her eyes drifting closed again. "Good," she murmured, a sigh escaping her lips. "Then I'll endure this for us." The hours passed slowly, the weight of his betrayal growing heavier with each passing minute. He watched her, feeling like a man caught in a trap of his own making, each breath he took tightening the chains of duty around him. As they neared the 7th hour, Livara's skin began to redden visibly under the harsh artificial sun. She winced, a soft gasp escaping her as she shifted uncomfortably. "Nolan." "It's starting to hurt," she admitted, her voice tinged with confusion. He clenched his fists, the guilt gnawing at him as he forced a steady tone. "It'll pass, Livara. Just a little longer. You're doing amazing." She tried to smile, but it faltered as another wave of discomfort passed over her. Still, she held her gaze on him, her expression soft and affectionate. "I trust you, Nolan," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'd do anything for you." The words hit him like a blow to the chest. She was willing to suffer, to endure whatever it took, just to be with him. And here he was, leading her toward inevitable betrayal. His resolve wavered, and he found himself fighting against the overpowering urge to confess everything, to let her see the truth. Finally, unable to stand the silence, he rose to his feet and walked a few paces away, staring out at the horizon as the minutes ticked by. His mind raced, caught between his loyalty to his mission and the undeniable bond he felt with her. He had never known this kind of connection, never felt so deeply entangled in someone's life. With less than 2 hours to go, he felt his heart pounding with dread. Livara's breaths were shallow now, her face pale and drawn as she fought to stay awake under the relentless heat. She looked at him, her eyes brimming with trust, even as exhaustion weighed down her gaze. "Nolan," she murmured, reaching for him. "Please, stay with me." He crossed back to her, his hands trembling as he took her outstretched hand. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin, could see the toll this ordeal was taking on her. And yet, she still managed a soft, reassuring smile, as if she sensed the turmoil inside him. As the final hour began, he knew he couldn't go through with it. The thought of letting her slip into unconsciousness, knowing she'd never understand the depth of his betrayal, was too much to bear. In a rush of adrenaline, he sprang to his feet, grabbing her hand and pulling her upright. "Livara, we need to leave. Now." She blinked in confusion, her movements sluggish as she tried to make sense of his urgency. "Nolan, what's happening? There's no time," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I'm taking you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't find us." Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and disbelief crossing her face. "Nolan, I don't understand. I was supposed to. They wanted me to." His voice cracked, and he struggled to find the words, his heart pounding as he looked into her trusting gaze. "Livara, they never intended for you to stay with me. I was supposed to bring you here so they could study you, so they could understand how your body adapts to Earth. They wanted to. They wanted you unconscious." A look of horror crossed her face, and she took a shaky step back, her hand flying to her mouth. You lied to me." "Yes," he whispered, the guilt finally crashing over him in waves. "But I swear, Livara, I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." She stared at him, her eyes brimming with tears, her expression a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "How could you? I trusted you. I thought you cared about me." "I do," he insisted, his voice thick with desperation. "More than anything, that's why I'm doing this. I'm leaving everything behind, just to keep you safe." For a long, agonizing moment, she said nothing, her gaze locked on his as she searched for any sign of sincerity. Finally, with a shaky breath, she nodded, her eyes softening just enough to let him see that she understood. "Then let's go. Let's leave before they come looking for us." They climbed into the vehicle, Nolan's hands shaking as he gripped the wheel, speeding away from the artificial sun and everything it represented. He knew they'd be hunted, that Earth's high command would stop at nothing to find them. But for now, with Livara beside him, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. As they drove, Livara remained silent, her gaze fixed out the window as she processed everything he'd told her. He wanted to reach out, to apologize, to explain himself further, but he knew that words wouldn't be enough. Only time would heal the wounds he'd inflicted. Eventually, after hours on the road, she looked over at him, her expression softened by a mixture of sadness and understanding. "Nolan, I can't forget what you did. But I can see that you're trying to make it right, and I still care for you, despite everything." Relief flooded his chest, and he nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, Livara. I promise." They traveled to a remote corner of Earth, far from the prying eyes of High Command, carving out a new life together. Nolan left behind his career, his title, and the world he had once pledged to protect, all for the woman who had shown him what it meant to truly feel alive. Months passed, and Livara's heart slowly began to heal. Their love, born from betrayal and redemption, grew stronger with each passing day. And one day, as they sat together beneath a quiet starlit sky, Livara placed a hand over her stomach, a gentle smile on her face. "We're going to have a child," she whispered, her voice laced with both wonder and trepidation. Nolan felt a surge of emotion he hadn't known was possible, a mingling of joy, relief, and fierce protectiveness. He took her hand, his fingers entwining with hers as he gazed into her eyes, seeing the depth of her love and trust shining there. Despite everything they'd been through, despite the secrets and the scars, here they were, building a life together that would soon be marked by the presence of new life. As the months went by, Nolan and Livara found solace in a small, secluded village nestled by an endless forest and a wide, quiet lake. The locals, few and far between, were warm yet respectful of their privacy. To them, Nolan and Livara were simply a mysterious couple, slightly odd but clearly devoted to each other. Each day, Nolan immersed himself in preparing for the arrival of their child. He spent hours fortifying their home, building furniture by hand, and collecting small comforts that might someday become memories for their child. Livara, unfamiliar with Earth's pregnancy norms, but fascinated by each new experience, spent her days observing the strange, delicate nature surrounding their new life, the singing of birds at dawn, the soft murmur of the lake, and the tender growth of her child within her. Yet, despite the peace they had found, Nolan could never quite shake the lingering dread. He knew that his former commanders hadn't forgotten about him, and the world was vast but far from hidden. The nagging worry kept him vigilant, his gaze often flickering over his shoulder as he scanned the surroundings, ready for any sign of trouble. One evening, as the air began to cool and dusk painted the sky in warm hues, Livara's hand tightened in his, drawing him out of his thoughts. She was glowing, her silver blue skin softened by the dim light, her eyes gleaming with an excitement that made his heart skip. "Come with me," she said softly, guiding him down to the edge of the lake. She moved with a sense of purpose, her footsteps light, as if she was following some inner compass that only she could feel. Nolan followed, curious and entranced by her sudden enthusiasm. They stopped at the water's edge, and Livara knelt, pressing her hand to her stomach as she gazed at the water. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her expression one of serene focus. Nolan knelt beside her, waiting, sensing that this moment was important. "I wanted to show you something," Livara whispered, her voice like a gentle echo over the water. "In my culture, it's believed that life begins long before the first breath. That even in the stars, our ancestors are watching over us, guiding us, waiting for us to bring the next generation into the world." Nolan reached for her hand, warmth flooding through him as he listened. "And what do we do for them?" he asked softly. Livara's lips curved into a gentle smile, and she reached into her pocket, pulling out a smooth, oval-shaped crystal that glowed faintly in the dimming light. She held it in her palm, showing it to him. "We give them a piece of our heart, a symbol of the life we will create together." Nolan looked at the crystal, its soft glow pulsing in sync with Livara's heartbeat. He felt a wave of awe and humility, realizing the depth of her beliefs and the traditions she carried with her. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. She turned to him, her gaze tender. "I want you to keep it, Nolan. It's my gift to you." "To us." She placed the crystal in his hand, her fingers lingering on his. "It will remind us of everything we fought for, of the love we chose despite everything. And someday, when our child is ready, we'll pass it on to them." Overcome, Nolan leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice barely a whisper. "Livara, I don't deserve this, But I promise I'll protect both of you, always." They spent the rest of the evening by the lake, wrapped in each other's arms, speaking in hushed tones of their dreams for their child. Livara shared memories of her own childhood on her distant planet, stories of vast forests with trees that glowed under twin moons, of rivers that sang, and of the deep sense of harmony her people felt with their world. Nolan listened, his heart swelling with the realization that, despite everything, he had been given a chance to create a new life with someone who understood him in ways no one else could. But as the seasons shifted, so did the shadows that followed them. Nolan had almost allowed himself to believe they were safe until one crisp autumn morning, when the quiet of their secluded life was shattered. Livara had just stepped outside, her rounded belly silhouetted against the early sunlight, when Nolan saw it, a single, unmarked black vehicle parked at the edge of the village. Panic clawed at him, and he quickly guided her back inside, locking the door behind them. His instincts, honed by years of training, told him that this was no coincidence. He watched from the window, his hand clenching around the crystal she'd given him, as two figures in dark suits emerged from the car, scanning the village with an unsettling precision. They moved in perfect sync, their posture rigid, their faces set with an impassive determination that made Nolan's blood run cold. Livara's hand found his, her grip trembling. "Nolan, what's happening?" "They've found us," he said, his voice tight with fear and anger. "We need to leave, now." Their quiet world erupted into a frenzy of movement. Nolan gathered their few belongings, his mind racing with potential escape routes as he ushered Livara toward the back of their small home. His heart pounded with a desperate urgency, but his resolve was unbreakable. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe. As they slipped out the back door, Livara glanced back, her expression a mixture of fear and sadness. "Nolan, this was our home." He squeezed her hand, his voice firm. "Our home is wherever we're together, Livara. We'll make a new one, somewhere they'll never find us." They moved swiftly, navigating the dense forest that surrounded the village, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. Nolan's mind remained sharp, his senses heightened by the danger that loomed behind them. Every snap of a twig, every distant rustle sent a surge of adrenaline through him. But with Livara by his side, he found strength he hadn't known he possessed. Hours later, when they finally reached the edge of the forest, Nolan halted, catching his breath. He turned to Livara, brushing a gentle hand over her cheek. "We'll keep running if we have to. I'll find a way to keep you and our child safe." Livara's eyes softened, her gaze unwavering. "Nolan, I trust you. Wherever we go, I know we'll be okay." In that moment, despite the uncertainty, despite the fear, Nolan felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Their journey would be long, and the road ahead filled with challenges, but together they had already overcome the impossible. And as he looked into Livara's eyes, he knew that no matter where they went, their love would be a beacon in the darkness, guiding them forward. With renewed determination, Nolan and Livara pressed on, their hearts bound by a love that had defied the boundaries of worlds, and now, together, they would forge a new path, unbreakable and unstoppable.